I want to bring you this. We thought long and hard about this as well, because there's a whole raft of things going on at the moment. And sometimes we know that the big story of coronavirus never really leaves us for more than a few minutes. But it is worth just looking at some positive headlines here. Part of the DNA, I probably don't need to tell you this, but for those who are new to the flock here at Talk Radio, part of the DNA here is that this station has always been incredible at talking positively about stories that warrant a positive response and a phone-in and comments from you. And if you look around the media, all too often it is doom and gloom. I mean, I mentioned the other day, Hugh Pym at the BBC has pretty much moved in to an intensive care unit. He's there so often. He's certainly on the Christmas card list, that's for sure. And it's true that when there are headlines out there that deserve to be looked at from a positive angle, we absolutely should do exactly that. So there's a little bit of an apology there, because I'm aware in the last couple of months some of the stories have been tricky and they've been a bit uncomfortable, and we've been talking coronavirus and all that goes along with that, and that by definition, there's not a lot of positivity that comes out of that story. But so therefore it's unashamedly worth a trip down this particular avenue and ask the question about Project Fear, in particular Project Fear. The world is going to come to an end if we leave the European Union. Within 6 months, I'm thinking out loud here, within 6 months, there will probably have to be a budget to deal with the fact that unemployment will rise within the first year by, I think, what was the figure that George Osborne gave? A loaf of bread was going to cost you about 50 quid. 3 million people would be unemployed. I mean, the list went on. It was doom and gloom, and I was looking at this thing, wow, this sure is a really bad idea, right? This Brexit thing. Is this really going to happen? And I thought, hang on a sec. And I know I'm repeating the line here. Coming out the EU was never, or being in the EU was never an act of physics. It was a man-made trading bloc that we decided to join. And for many people, that was absolutely the right decision, particularly back in the 70s when the original common market vote went out and people thought, well, that seems pretty good. We've had a rough old time under the socialists here in the UK. Maybe we'll fare a little better in a wider setting with an EU trading deal. And so we joined, and 40 odd years later, we left again. We had a little look round, enjoyed it for a moment, didn't like much what we saw, and put the democratic vote out there and left. And of course the arguments were plentiful. I kept thinking of all the arguments that you could have about Brexit. It seemed extraordinary to me that anybody would be claiming that it was either an economic or a trading impossibility to be outside of it. It just seemed lunacy to me, because you've only got to point to most other countries that are not in the EU. Now, we might have had a tasty trade deal with the EU because we were part of the EU, and that means there's a bit of a bumpy road to get some semblance of normality back in that. I understand that. I know the fishing industry is having a bit of a torrid time on this very point, but the idea that you couldn't get out of something that was just a trading, it just seemed anti-intellectual mumbo-jumbo, and this was wheeled out day in, day out. And Osborne he claimed that leaving the EU would leave every family £4,300 worse off. And he wrote this on the back of a cigarette packet, of course. And they were arguing their cause, and others were arguing the other side. But it seemed ridiculous, a ridiculous notion to argue that it wasn't possible to be outside of the EU. That just seemed like an act of gross stupidity to throw this out. Why would it not be possible? How do you fare in Japan? How do they fare in New Zealand, Australia, Pakistan, India, all over the world? How do you fare outside the EU? Why couldn't another country that currently is in the EU do the same thing and fare just as well as those countries outside of the EU? So was Project Fear a big fat lie? Let me put it to you like that. 0344 499 1000. I think sometimes when we do phone-ins like this, there's an assumption that I only want to talk to people who are going to agree with me. What would be really tasty is to speak to people who completely disagree with this point and have a very different view on this. And I was taken really to this. There were two things that were happening today. There was some great economic news that it looks as if we're going to be out of the doldrums quicker than we thought post-coronavirus, financially speaking, that within the next year we should be back to pre-pandemic levels. So that's some good news. But it was the Cadbury story that got me. I know this is one company, and therefore not in itself, but I'll come on to the others, not in itself the totemic answer to why post-Brexit will be fantastic. But it's very significant that a company like Cadbury, that was bought out several years ago by Mondelez International, which owns the brand now, decided to return to the Bourneville factory, where back in the 1870s, Bourneville chocolate, Cadbury chocolate began. Extraordinary. 15 million quid's worth of investment in the Birmingham site, the company said, from 2022. And they'll be making thousands and thousands of tonnes. Bourneville produced 35 tonnes of Cadbury dairy milk tablets. 234 million bars. Did you know that? The investment will allow them to make an additional 12,000 tonnes of chocolate. So the significance of Cadbury coming back is absolutely vast. And of course it comes on the back of Nissan confirming that it will keep the Sunderland plant open for long term now that the trade deal is done between the UK and the EU. That plant employs 6,000 workers. Now, I know that a Remainer will say, well, we already had that deal. Why are we celebrating not losing something? Well, it is significant because Nissan have crunched the numbers. They've looked at this and thought, we employ 6,000 hard-working people at this plant, 70,000 people through the wider supply chain. Don't tell me that's not significant. 76,000 people are part and parcel of the brilliant story that Nissan will remain in Sunderland in this country. Nissan, Cadbury. Do you want more? I've got more. Let me bring you Barclays. Barclays, for goodness sake, one of the biggest banks in the world. The UK financial services industry should focus on competing with the USA and Asia rather than the EU. This is according to the boss. He's talking about life after Brexit. Jess Staley has said that although jobs that were originally created here have now moved to the EU, Britain gives one of the most important sectors the chance to define its own agenda. He said, I think Brexit is more positive on that side than negative. So when you have Nissan and Cadbury and the boss of Barclays making mood music like this, you have to take a very serious look at this story and say, you know what, it is early days. We're only, 6 weeks into fully being out of the EU in the conventional sense. This picture is looking pretty good, right? Was Project Fear just a Project Beer? There was a lot of Project Beer after that referendum result. We know that. Project Fear, was it just a big tissue of whoppers, a huge fat lie? 0344 499 1000. I'm bound to throw this as well into your own experience of your own company or organisation and what it's looking like. And if the news isn't pretty, well, we're all ears on that one as well. But if you are sensing that this Cadbury, Nissan, Barclays story is kind of beginning to form the early stages of a bit of a narrative, and that's what I'm thinking. So great optimistic news about the future of our economy, which we thought was going to be in the doldrums for a decade, could jump out of that within a year. That's great news. Massive companies like this saying post-Brexit's made either no difference, or they'll continue to invest, or they'll reinvest, or they'll come back in the case of Cadbury. There's a lot of good news here.